Hi guys, and welcome back to
The Results Show.
The Results Show indeed. In this episode, we are continuing to have a chat with Kallum and Conor, the guys who are joining us here from Australia, about their journey to basically learn NLP and Huna, and more importantly, get the results from it. So we had, if you haven't watched the previous episode, then have a look, because it's got a fascinating journey. They've kind of both come at it from slightly different angles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's the whole point with a lot of people, as we've said last time. Everybody's reason for learning this is different, but the life-changing results that everybody gets far outweigh their expectations of what this is going to do for them.
Absolutely. Be careful.
Yes.
When you come and do one of our trainings.
In a good way, of course. It's not scary. It's just the person that leaves might not be the person who turned up.
Quite.
So what we're looking to do in this episode is basically, having established your guys' backstory in your journey, what we'd like to do is basically take a snapshot of where things are now. So how you guys are now using it. And then also, because I think you've got some exciting plans for the future, which we would love to hear about. So who would like to lead off first with what these technologies look like for you today?
Nice one. Cal, do you want to kick it off?
You go for it, buddy.
All right, buddy. So,
hospital pass.
being in this industry for 21 years, one thing that I should probably mention is that Kallum and I are very driven. We're driven on multiple fronts, and we're driven by making a difference in the world. We're driven by reminding people that the future is bright, and that lights us up. So whenever we feel as though we are in a bit of a plateau, we feel like maybe, in business and in life, from time to time, you have to tap into your why. Why do you do what you do? And that sort of reignites you and puts you back on the aligned path that you know that you should be on for yourself, or you want to be on for yourself. And for us, and for me personally, it has been a heavy influence on the use of the NLP language patterns.
Right.
And when I first started working with Tad back in 2004, it was a small office in Australia. We had like 4 people. And my dad was a big influence in my life, and he was an executive, and we lived around the world as expats, and every move was promotion, and he sort of worked his way up the McCann Erickson corporate ladder. McCann Erickson was a very large advertising firm in the 60s and 80s and 90s, I guess.
Yeah, I remember.
So he made his way up to managing director, and that's why we moved to New Zealand. So being sprightly, young adult, I wanted to follow in his footsteps. And when I started working with Tad and Advanced Dynamics, the Tad James company, there was no ladder for me to climb. There was no corporate ladder for me to feel that I am achieving something on a title level, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I loved what I did. I loved talking with people. I loved helping people inspire themselves to know that they're capable of more and to achieve what they want to achieve in life, be it personal, financial, relationships, health, fitness, whatever. And so what I realized at an early time was that if I'm going to stay in this industry and continue working with Tad, which I loved, there's no ladder for me to climb. I can either do a parts integration and be okay with not climbing a ladder, or I could create the ladder below me. And that's exactly what my motivation was to grow that company. So I had a ladder that I could say that I'm at the top of the corporate ladder. And that was my initial, one of my major motivations at that time was to grow that office. And that meant employing people. That meant doing a better job for myself at sales. That meant leading a team, things I had never done before. And when I learned NLP language patterns, and I learned the meaning behind the words and how the power, like the word spell and spelling, the word spell means many things, but for this podcast, spell is essentially saying a few words and then change occurs in front of you.
Yep.
And spelling of words are, for me, it felt like words had I'll say the word power, but I don't mean power over someone, but words had the ability to change people. And I used to always think of that phrase, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Right.
And I'm like, what does that mean? Why would people say that? Of course not. The sword's mightier than the pen. And then when I learned language, I realized why that phrase has been around for many, many years. And that is the power of the language. And I realized that people, when they start communicating with you for the first time, it's often a blank canvas. It's like a blank canvas. And they will start painting a picture in their mind based on their own filters, based on their own internal direction. However, the language I use will absolutely influence the brushstrokes that they have in order to paint that picture. And when I understood that first and foremost in sales, my sales improved. When I understood that from a leadership perspective, my leadership went through the roof. And as a result, over time, I was able to build that business up. We ended up having close to 20 team members, in the latter years, only in the Australian office, and we had another 8 or 10 in the US office, so close to 30 in total. And it was always down to the language.
Right.
And when I look at all of the great orators, all of the great communicators, and all the great entrepreneurs and professionals, there's one thing they all have in common, and that's their ability to communicate, their ability to tell stories, their ability to say the words that inspire and influence people. So coming back to your original question, Pete, about where are we going and how we are using this, Kallum and I are probably, over the years, I've sold a lot of NLP. I've probably arguably sold up there in the top 5, more NLP trainings than anyone else in the world.
Yep.
Over the phone and in the back of the room. And I'm not talking about your $7 NLP trainings where you're buying
No.
paper.
Yeah.
I'm talking about proper investment of a training, a 7-day training that requires a significant investment of time and resources in order to make it happen. Cal and I would sell anything from a $4,000 NLP practitioner training to a $50,000 business success package with individuals who wanted to make a difference in their life. And now, for myself personally, and Kallum is very much, we are very, very aligned in regards to why we do what we do and how we do it. And that is to inspire others, piggybacking off what Kallum said, in the last podcast about the spirituality, to create the matter within their life now. And through that process, it is a highly spiritual process. And we do that by helping people believe. See, people have an idea. They have an idea first. And before they take any action on that idea, they have to have an internal check to see, can they do it? Am I aligned with it? And they, by the way, they don't talk to themselves about this. They don't consciously have this conversation, but this is what happens. And what Kallum and I are the best in the world at, and we love doing, is taking someone who has an idea, has an interest in their life, and getting them to step out of the mold that kept them where they were before and catapults them into the future to where they want to be. And we do that through business. We do that through sales. We do that through presenting. We do that in the tangible, physical ways that we know that people can change their life. And for us, that is incredibly rewarding. And in my specialty, I've trained hundreds and hundreds of sales professionals. I've hired hundreds of different sales professionals. I love sales because it's so much more than the transaction.
Yeah.
It's actually a whole body experience in on a spiritual level, because you're not just, okay, you have low end, when I say low end, low ticket offers, where there's not much of an emotional buy-in required from the customer. When you have higher ticket items, such as NLP, which are in the many thousands, and like I said, a $50,000 business success package, you bet there's an emotional buy-in required from the prospect, from the client. And for me, I love getting that prospect lit up about their future, so much so that it completely dispels any doubts they have about their ability in order to move forward. And Kallum and I are the best in the business at helping someone not only make that decision, but being there with them every step of the way. And that's probably one of the main draw cards, or one of the main reasons how Cal and I really fell in alignment immediately was our ecology on how we do this. was the inspiration it gave us in order to see a difference in someone else's life. So I hope that answers your question. I've gone on a couple of tangents there.
You said your dad worked in advertising. Did you ever read Ogilvy on advertising?
I never read Ogilvy on advertising, no.
There is a lovely passage in there which has always stuck with me. We're talking about language, in terms of its effectiveness. And he basically relates the story of Demosthenes. So basically, back in the day, the Greeks were deciding whether they were going to go to war against Philip of Macedon. And one of these speakers basically stood up and talked for an hour. And when he sat down, everyone said, "Oh, didn't he speak beautifully?" And then Demosthenes stood up, spoke for 5 minutes. And when he sat down, they said, "Let's march on Philip." So the point about it is you get some people who you're very eloquent and all the rest of it. But what we're talking about here is how do you use language effectively? Because the job of the orator was to basically help these guys to make a decision, and his words were effective and they created the results. And that's the kind of language which I admire, which is the language where you communicate something that then creates behaviors and beliefs and actions and results in other people. And it sounds like exactly that kind of science of linguistics and wordplay and motivation is kind of like at the core of kind of what you guys do.
Absolutely. Working and being mentored by Tad, I realized he spoke differently. And it's like, it may not be exact traditional grammar that I had grown up to believe was proper English.
Yeah.
But it got results. And it inspired, it got people moving. It got people taking massive action in their life. So I thought to myself, what is that all about? And it was the conscious use of language, which then became unconscious use of language when you become unconsciously competent about something.
Yeah.
And I studied it. So how did I fall into it, or how did I excel in it? It was application. It was learning it and then going through the growth phase required in order to apply it. So I was out of my comfort zone. I would have all of my NLP language patterns in front of me, and whenever I had an opportunity to talk to someone, I would use it. And Tad, even in one of his audio tracks, he would say that there's a language process called the Milton Model Language Patterns. And he said that he would have all 30, I think there are 29 language patterns. and he would practice one for the week.
Yep.
And constantly use that one for the week. And I did something very, very similar. I was lucky at the time because I was in a sales role and I was talking to people all day, every day. So I practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. And as a result, became very proficient at using those language patterns. And as a result, my leadership skills went through the roof. My influencing skills went through the roof. But it wasn't for the purpose of, it's funny, in sales, the outcome is the sales. But the great salespeople love the process. And everyone loves buying from someone who creates an enjoyable sales process.
Yep.
And they'll keep coming back to that person and keep buying from them because they've had such a positive, in NLP terms, kinesthetic, they've had such a positive feeling buying from that person, they'll keep going back to that person.
Yep.
Because there's a saying, isn't there, that people hate being sold to, but they love to buy. So what you're doing is you're creating a buying experience, not a selling experience.
100%. It's one of my favorite sayings. People love to buy. They hate being sold to. And I'm a good buyer. I'm an easy buyer. I love buying myself. So from a perceptionist projection point of view, which is probably a whole nother podcast, if I love to buy, I'm going to attract people, or at least create the situation that people are going to love to buy much more organically versus needing to force it, because it's a natural occurrence within myself.
Yes.
So I hope that I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does. And where we are now in regards to sales and language is we've been Connect Coaching. We've been in business for 18 months now, roughly 18 months. And already we've trained 300 to 400 trainers and coaches how to sell at the highest possible level, how to sell with confidence, how to sell with certainty, how to sell themselves that they're great. And that is the first step is to sell themselves first.
Yes.
And
On value that they can bring.
and we'll put a link in the
Yes, underneath the video, or
Underneath the
indeed
video.
around the podcast if you're listening to us.
Connect Coaching with a K rather than with a C. So we'll make sure the correct link is there. And Conor, that you mentioned Milton model there, which obviously we learn a lot on the NLP practitioner, master practitioner training. The other thing that was coming up for me, which I know I got this from being around Tad so much, was the whole Alfred Korzybski's general semantics model as well, which is, Korzybski actually in his book that was written, the preface was in 1933, used the term general semantics and neuro-linguistics.
Right, okay, so distant ancestry there.
Yeah, and so you've got the Milton model gives you a lot of the structure of the language. Then Korzybski really starts to talk about the impact of the semantic meaning of the word. A lot of people say, "Oh, David, you're just talking semantics," and I go, "Yes, quite."
Yes, and there's no just in that sentence. It's
Yeah.
That strongly resonates with me, and there are two common quotes that I reference in the sales training, and that is, one is by Andre Müller-Weitzenhofer, who was the German hypnotherapist, and he would say the client will not actualize what the hypnotherapist does not believe to be true. So I've mapped that across to sales. If you're in business and in life, but the client will not actualize what the hypnotherapist does not believe to be true. So if you do not believe, first and foremost, within yourself, within your product, within your service, if you do not believe that the person will buy, the likelihood of that happening is diminished considerably. And the second one is, I think I referenced it from Tad's book, Hypnosis: A Comprehensive Guide. And in that book, he said, think what you want your client to do as you're saying it to them.
Right.
Think what you want your client to do as you are saying it to them. So in sales, I would always imagine the prospect following through with the purchase as I'm literally describing how their life will be once they consume the service or the product. And I have found that is one of the unwritten gold nuggets that I've used and I didn't know I was doing it until I was conscious of that quote. I was literally imagining the prospect purchasing, enjoying themselves in the NLP training, getting the results they want in their life, and I was imagining it as I was describing it to them. And when you have rapport, the deepening of that rapport is quite profound. And this is one of the reasons why I love the sales, is because you actually take people on a life journey. It's not just about the sale; it's about taking someone on a life journey and being part of that.
Yeah, and I mean, what you talk about there, Conor, is like in Huna, that's creating and transmitting thought forms, which is something we talk about at Huna Level 3. But then also in my personal magnetism masterclass I've got going on at the moment, that's how what Theron Cudemont talks about is about thought transference. A lot of people think of this thing as being ESP, reading other people's thoughts. Well, if you can do it that way, you can do it the other way too, and implant totally energetically in somebody's mind where they will be after they've made the sale.
Yes.
I guess one of the other
is that they bought.
Yeah. I guess the other thing about it as well is because what you're also doing is because with a lot of the language that we've been talking about, we've been referring to the spoken language, but you've also got tremendous amounts of communication coming through in terms of body language. So it's almost like what you're doing is you're piggybacking the vocal transmission, and when you're basically imagining that, what you're basically doing is making sure that your entire physicality is also coherent with what you're saying. Because one of the biggest things which, if somebody is trying to make a sale, if they are not coherent, or if somebody is considering about buying, if there are mixed messages coming across, so for instance, somebody could get the words absolutely right, but if there's a problem with their tonality, if there's a problem with their body language, then there will be warning flags which pop up and just goes, there's something about this that isn't right.
Yeah, quite.
100%. And from NLP, there are two things that come to mind. One of them is anchoring. So if you are in a positive state and you want to anchor it, and you would like to anchor a positive state on your client, you need to be in that state first and foremost. And then that transference of energy through rapport, the client will more likely get into that positive state. And it happens all the time. Someone will start laughing, and the person next to them has no idea why the other person is laughing, but they start laughing for no reason. And that's a transference of that energy. That's a transference of that state. And the second is in NLP, there have been multiple studies, but the one we sort of focus on is that the words we use are 7% of our communication. So 93% of our communication is something else. So if I was to study for an exam, and I knew that 93% was weighted in one topic, I would study that topic.
Yes.
I would study that topic and protect that topic, because I know that 93% of that exam is done, and the likelihood of me getting a high mark goes through the roof if I can master that 93%.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know we're limited on time. So
we are.
Cal, have you got any final comments on what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think what we're all talking about here, if we break it down into like the quintessential essence of it, is we're changing our realities by changing our minds. And my big question is, what's the difference between seeing things differently and things being different? And if you can master the language patterns that Conor discussed, if you can utilize that understanding of the client not actualizing what you do not believe to be true or possible, if you start to utilize language and your thoughts in a way that you're imagining your client to do the things that you want them to do before they do it, then you're creating a change of perception. And NLP was premised on the fact that it's an attitude that leaves behind the trail of techniques. And all of the techniques that we're talking about are techniques that effectively change people's focus.
Yep.
Changes their mind. It creates a different state, which creates a different behavior, which creates different results. So if you can simplify NLP down into that aspect, that you are effectively changing the perception of not only your client, but also yourself, then the reality that you end up in and the results that you get as a result of that become dramatically different. And it helps you to be, as whoever's listening to this, if they're a practitioner, master trainer, or even someone that's just really interested in the field, if you can be brave enough to understand NLP on this level, whether it be NLP, hypnosis, Huna, timeline therapy, on this level, that you're effectively just retuning someone's field of awareness through the process of changing their focus, then you'll use the techniques more often, and you'll get into the invention room more often. And I think that, after talking to yourself, David, talking to Tad, and a number of the other greats in the NLP field, the whole industry was built on the back of being inventive on the practical use of these techniques and experimentation. And after you learn these techniques, the power in them is only limited by both your imagination, but also your willingness to use them. And I think it's important that people get back into the invention room, test out how it changes your perception. I remember being in NLP trainers training, watching one of the students being adjudicated and sitting back, noticing some stuff coming up from my unconscious mind. And the presentation they were doing and the demonstration they were doing was a swish pattern.
Right.
And I thought, oh, this problem's coming up inside of me. Why don't I just ask my unconscious mind what the desired state would look like and then swish this present state with that and see what happens? What happened was a complete transformation of my perception and a problem that doesn't ever exist anymore. So until you're willing to jump into the invention room, until you're willing to experiment, you're not really truly embodying what this field is actually built on. And that is getting out there, being inventive and getting results.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think an interesting word that you used in the middle of that was about people being brave enough to leap into practitioner. And, you know, the thing that I'm hearing more and more and more with the people who are like have gone out there and really created big results with what they learned from NLP, hypnosis, stimulating therapy, and Huna. I don't know, it's almost like we were too innocent or naive to know that we needed to be brave.
Yes.
I think permission too, David. I think people are waiting for permission. I remember, you know, we learned as you know, from TAD, in a very, you know, traditional structured way of NLP. It was kept quite pure compared to a number of the training companies that are around right now.
Yeah.
And I felt that I couldn't step outside of these lines. You know, there was, you know, follow the script was like installed and like just
No, it was like
there's lots of canon
into my psyche, you know. And I think that people need to give themselves permission, and that will help them to be brave enough to experiment. And I think that's an important part of someone's development through the NLP field. And I really only learned this as a master trainer. You know, you become the master, but that's when you really begin to be the student, because you give yourself finally the permission to go outside the lines and see what else is out there.
Yeah, I mean, when I was made a master trainer of NLP, I wasn't expecting it because, you know, the master trainer is 5 years and I'd only been in the master trainer program for 2 years. And, you know, I was invited out for dinner with Tad and the other master trainers, and I was honored to be invited out for dinner. That was enough, you know. And then I got handed this brown paper package. And I'm thinking, what's this? And I opened it, and it was my master trainer certificate. You know, and I'm going like, what? I'm not expecting this for another 3 years. And Tad just said to me, he said, Dave, you know, we're at trainers training. You've brought 20, 30 students out to trainers training. I'm looking out at the audience, because we had about 100 people on that trainers training. I'm looking out at the audience and I can't tell who are your students and who are mine. So therefore, you're acting as if you're a master trainer. And if you act as if you're a master trainer good enough, nobody else will ever find out.
That's funny.
But that was what Tad was like, you know.
And that's it, isn't it? It's basically about doing whatever you can to get the results for the people that you want to care about, or who have a duty of care towards doing. Because it's one of the things that we're talking about in terms of sales is, and again, we're not necessarily just talking about this in terms of sales as in, you know, transactions, but I remember, you know, somebody turned around to me and saying, well, everybody sells. You know, if you're a leader, you're selling in your decisions or your plans to people. If you're a family, you know, if you're a father, you're selling in the right course of action to your children.
Yep.
So, you know, it's not always about, can I have the long number at the front of your credit card? Anything whereby you are encouraging somebody to take a particular course of action and to do something, then all of these techniques are applicable too.
Correct.
That's right, and that's a big part of the Forever Client Matrix, which is nested inside of our Connect and Convert 2-day training. It's really about turning those transactions into transformations.
Yes.
When people have a breakthrough session with you effectively on the first sales call, and they're sharing with you stuff that they haven't ever shared with anybody before, and you're helping them to believe in themselves for the first time, you build so much trust and reliability. And in this industry at the moment, we need that, because it's the currency of the future. There's so much distrust in this field, and in business in general. And if you have the Forever Client Matrix in your back pocket, if you know how to traverse through those different resistance bands and the different phases that you go through, people end up closing themselves.
Yeah.
And there's very little effort on your behalf. And that's why people should attend.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, I was going to say, we're probably coming up to time. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, so we're bringing. I think it's an open secret now, isn't it, Conor, that you're coming out to the UK.
Yes, I'm extremely excited about that.
To do your sales training out here, and I'm coming out to Australia to teach Huna and the Wizard's Secret. So we shall be.
We'll be high-fiving in the air somewhere across the Pacific.
spanning the globe over the next 6 months, something like that. So if you're interested in that, then stay tuned. Subscribe both to our YouTube channel and other podcast channels, also to Connect Coaching. We'll put the link in for that. So that means that you'll get all of the information about being able to actually physically attend. I think that's a really important thing. Physically attend those trainings, not online. Be there physically in person. I think, from my experience, from these guys' experience, being in the room physically makes a massive difference.
Yes. It's like being on a date. You can do it over a phone. Being in a room, it's just so much nicer.
And you don't have to clean the screen so often.
Correct. And on that rather unusual note, Kallum and Conor, thank you so much for attending. Are we going to be able to attempt to get you onto future podcasts?
Oh, I think so. Look, working with Performance Partnership and Connect Coaching is incredibly synergistic, and we've actually deep dived into a lot of content that we wouldn't have already, I guess, created unless it had been with the minds together. So, Kallum,
totally.
I think that's a resounding yes.
Yeah, great.
100%.
Fantastic. Okay, so in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, then it is podcast@theresultsshow.com. That is podcast@theresultsshow.com. So again, thank you very much indeed to Kallum and Conor. I know you guys have got to rush off, so have a great day ahead over in Oz, and we will see you guys next time.